Hello, everyone. I'm Marcia Kavanaugh. Thanks so much for joining us. Well, the good news this weekend is that we won't be distracted by the Saints. The bad news, of course, is that we won't be distracted by the Saints. Though not as exciting as a pass from Brees to Colston, there is other news to occupy our attention, including city elections, a hospital controversy, the mayor and his enemies, new laws for Carnival, and the Pelicans now with a spotlight to themselves. In the light for us are tonight's Informed Sources. Errol, Laborde, producer of Informed Sources. Tyler Bridges, reporter, The Lens. Jeff Duncan, sports reporter, NOLA.com, the Times-Picayune. And Stephanie Grace, columnist, the New Orleans Advocate. First, Jeff, to you and our Saints season. And yes, it was a heartbreaker. It definitely was. But the Saints did make them worry, the Seahawks, a bit, didn't they?
Well, you know, it's funny. Normally at this time of year, everybody's in a Great Depression. But I sense a little more optimism this year than in the past. And I think it's because they came off of such a grueling season the year before. It was so grim after the Bounty Gate. And no one really knew what to expect from this team going in. You know, there was a lot of unanswered questions with Sean Payton coming back and where they would finish. And I think for the most part, people were excited that they ended up 11-5, and I think probably surprised that they were did as well as they did. I think there's a little tinge of disappointment because they started so fast. Mm-hmm. At one point, they were 9-2 when they went out to Seattle, and we were talking about maybe they'll be the number one seed in the whole playoffs. And then they ended up losing 4 of their last 7 games. So there was a little bit of a downer there, I guess, at the end of the year. It reminded me a lot of the 2006 season, frankly, where they got off to that great start, if you remember, in the Steve Gleason block punt, and they were riding emotion early in the season. And then they kind of leveled off and really, I think, almost overachieved that year. That's what this season feels like. And I think there's a lot of reason for people to be excited because this team finally has a defense. Finally, they have something they can hang their hat on that side of the ball. We know the offense is going to always be prolific under Sean Payton and Drew Brees. So I think there's a lot of things to be excited about going into next year.
Jeff, do you think this year's team was hurt by Sean Payton being away last season? Is there something that he would have missed or known that could have made a difference for this season?
No, I actually think it helped him. I mean, he's talked about that. It gave him some perspective being away from the game. And I think he was much more patient as a play caller. And I think leaned on his running game a little bit more in the past. That's always been a criticism, as that he's too impulsive, gives up on running the ball with the running backs, and they needed that in Philadelphia. I'm sure everybody watched that game. They played in very, very cold conditions on the road, and that's always undermined their ability to win in the playoffs on the road. They finally got over the hump and won a road playoff game. I thought that was significant for them going forward. Now they got to figure out how they can catch and pass the Seattle Seahawks and the San Francisco 49ers. They're the class of the NFC. And, you know, Marcia, we were talking earlier, this is starting to remind me a little bit of back in the Jim Mora days when this team was good year after year but couldn't get over the hump against the 49ers. I can see a similar scenario setting up now.
But is there a chance that we could get by that, though, be better than that? I mean, you always hear the term, wait till next year. That's what we've always heard, you know, for so many years with the Saints, wait till next year. Do we have more legs with that wait till next year, this go-round, than we have had in the past?
Certainly they're in the mix with those teams. I mean, they were right there this year. And you never know how a given year plays out.
And they beat the 49ers.
Right, and injuries, you know, the schedule is always a quirk and is different every year. And we all know that if they can get home field advantage or get some of these playoff games in the Superdome, I mean, they're unbeatable there just about. They were 8-0 this year. The year they went to the Super Bowl was the year they had home field advantage. They've got to find a way to get over that hump and get into the Superdome for the playoffs.
So the general assessment then of this team out there in the football world, out there in the league, what would you say it is now with the Saints from this season?
Well, I think they see them as a perennial contender. As long as Sean Payton and Drew Brees are there together, that nexus is really what wins games in the NFL, the coach and the quarterback. In a lot of ways, I think they mirror the New England Patriots. That's the model organization that they need to follow. With Tom Brady and Bill Belichick, they're in the hunt every year. And Sean Payton told us that early on when he came to the Saints. His goal was just to get into the playoffs every year. And then you never know, you know, year after year, breaks happen, injuries. You just want to be in the mix. And the more times you're in the mix, like the Patriots this year, this is the 9th championship game that they've played in. Eventually you're going to break through and get another Super Bowl. I think that's the goal for Brees and Payton, is to get another one. But before this window closes, because it's going to close soon. Drew just turned 35 years old the other day. So, he's only got maybe 5 years left, I think, playing at the elite level, and that's the key.
I think that's something that he sort of touched on when he gave his comments after the game. He's been in the league, what he said, for 13 seasons, and each time you just see that opportunity, and each time it goes by, there are less opportunities in the future. You could just sort of see how heartfelt he was about that.
I thought that was interesting that you picked up on that as well, because we all sensed that in the press conference. And, it harkens back to that 2011 season when they were so close. They went to San Francisco, had the lead in the very final minute, and would have had a chance to play the NFC Championship game back in the Superdome, and it slipped through the cracks. That might be one that haunts them for a while.
That's hurt. There are so many good young quarterbacks, too. He's got to feel them nipping at his heels.
I'm sure.
No question.
35 is a young man, but in the league it's kind of tough. Okay, sports, now to the next game that we have,
Different
and that
sports.
is
Yes.
different sports, and that's politics. And we're in the midst now, the middle of city elections. First, mayor.
First mayor. Well, we're actually less than 2 weeks away from the primary. We have these crazy short post-holiday election seasons in New Orleans still. This is the last one of those before schedule changes. Mitch Landrieu, I think he was expecting a different kind of campaign, I'll tell you that. He was not a coronation, but easier than this. So he has one pretty prominent opponent, a couple of opponents, actually only one dropped out. Manny Chevrolet Bruno is no more on this. So.
I didn't realize he was gone. Okay.
So we're down to 3. Michael Bagneris, the judge who retired in order to run this campaign, got in very late, but has really amassed, I called it a coalition of the aggrieved. Basically, a lot of people who seem to be mad at the mayor for a bunch of different reasons. To me, the big question is, do voters care? This is it's kind of an insider thing. It's a lot of people who've done business or have had political dealings or have fought with him on a whole range of issues. So, the two questions to me are, do people beyond this inner circle really care? And if so, which side are they on? Because some of these, it's a lot about personality, I think, but there's some substance to some of these disputes. A lot of them have to do with money, with scarce resources, and the fact, and if you ask the mayor, he'll say that. Now, I don't think you can put everything on that, but some of these judgments that he's really bristled at, legal judgments, have been basically, he calls them unfunded mandates. He sounds like a Republican sometimes when he talks about unfunded mandates and unelected federal judges. But what he's really talking about is the fact that he is responsible for supporting a lot of different other entities, and he doesn't really have a say over how they spend their money. And I think that's been a real frustration to him.
What are the opponents attacking him on primarily?
Again, as I said, personality. I think there is definitely a feeling, and this goes way back to his career in the legislature. It certainly goes back through his term as mayor, that he wants everyone in step behind him.
But beyond personality, what sort of issues are they attacking him on?
The fact that he disputed the federal police consent decree when he had initially agreed to it. He will say that's because the feds came in with his Orleans Parish Prison consent decree and the city can't afford both. He's fighting with the firefighters over fully funding their pension. He's been fighting with a lot of the judges over, he supports reducing the number of judges, things like that.
And isn't Michael Bagneris saying that the biggest issue in the race is crime?
He is saying that. It's interesting. He said initially when he announced he was going to unveil a detailed crime platform. We're less than 2 weeks out, and he hasn't done that yet. He has talked about firing the chief Surpass, and hiring a lot more cops, but he hasn't talked about...
And how would he do that? How would he hire?
Well, so far he's really said, I would fire some deputy mayors, I would fire some well-paid people.
And that's where he would find the money.
But, as the mayor says, that really doesn't get you there.
But Stephanie, since the current form of government, the Home Rule Charter, was created in '54, every mayor has won his second term. And during your first term as mayor, you're going to offend somebody.
Of course.
There's going to be somebody that's
Maybe
mad.
A lot of people.
And quite often it's people like the police and the firemen, because they've always have to face those issues. I remember Dutch Morial, when he was elected to his second term, the day after, he thought he'd be basking in glory. He had a very bitter press conference. He was offended that he had to fight so much, so hard for a second term. Now, he thought there may have been some racial connotations, but yeah, you can hurt somebody as mayor. And so even though they've all won by a landslide, there's always a group of people out there that were offended at something.
Yeah. And we're going to go into that a little bit more in depth with Tyler, because Tyler did a piece about that, specifically about Mayor Landrieu. But I want to talk to you about council also, because that's a big part of these elections too.
Yeah. Well, for the first time, the council at-large position is divided into two separate elections. It used to be everyone ran in the same pot, and then there's a very complex formula. And so you have separate races in council at large. You have what is now called Division A, and this is Stacey Head versus Eugene Green. Stacey Head, of course, is the incumbent. She was elected in the special election. Seems to have the best finance campaign. Then the other one, which is now Division 2, Cynthia Hedge Morrell, who is term limited as a district councilman and who was actually behind getting these at-large districts divided into two, is running. And actually, there's two people who sat on the council in this race because Ernest Freddie Charbonnet served as an interim council member. And then Jason Williams is putting on a fairly good television campaign, and he might be a contender too. And so this race could bounce in a lot of different directions.
He comes from a political family. His father-in-law is Sidney Bartholomew, the former mayor.
Right.
And we did a story in the Lens showing that he owed a lot of taxes. And I don't know if voters care about that, but I thought that was pretty interesting.
Actually, all these people connected, like the Charbonnet family is very prominent.
Right.
Of course,
and
the Morrell family, and so it's a lot of fairly well-collected families. This is in Council District A. Susan Guidry is the incumbent. This district has had a lot of turnover over the last few years. They elected Jay Batt, and they defeated him, and then they came back, and so on. And so Susan Guidry, I think, it seems to be in pretty good shape, even though she has the most opposition. Drew Ward is the one Republican in the entire race, yet the Republican Executive Committee has endorsed him. I'd still call Susan Guidry. There doesn't seem to be the same sort of outrage in this district that there were in previous elections.
District B?
Okay, now we go to District B. This is the easy one. Latoya Cantrell. This is Stacey Head's former district seat, and so Latoya Cantrell, who was elected to replace Stacey Head when Stacey Head got the at-large position, she was elected as an interim, and she was uncontested.
Just as last year she was elected in 2013.
Right.
Okay, next district.
District C. This is an interesting race because there's a vacancy here. And Jackie Clarkson, who was retiring from the at-large position, he used to be a district council member, is running for this seat at the urging of a lot of people, she says, and of course at the urging
including
of,
the mayor.
Yeah.
Right, that's right.
Lourdes Moran, who's been a council on the school board, Nadine Ramsey, who's been a former judge. It looks like, if I was a guessing man, I would say there's a possibility of this being a runoff between Clarkson and Ramsey, and that's going to depend a lot on turnout in terms of which way that the
Moran's supporters probably overlap with Clarkson's pretty much.
Okay. District D, this is where you don't have an incumbent because this is Cynthia Hedge Morrell's former seat. Jared Brasa is a state legislator, so he is the one elected official, so that probably gives him a leg up in this race.
And he's part of the Morrell sort of clan, right?
Part of that
the
political family, right?
And next district?
And in District E, James Gray, who was also elected in a special election since the last time, and Cynthia Willis Lord, who is a former district council member, is running against him. The two are friends. I don't know if they're friends anymore, but it'll probably come down to a slugfest between the two of them.
Right.
All right, so that's the slate of the councilmanic races, and actually early voting starts tomorrow, correct? Right. Tomorrow on Saturday. Tyler, let's get over to you and talk about the piece that you did about the mayor and his enemies. Stephanie had been addressing that, and of course Errol just talked about it too, where sometimes a mayor really can seem to be a little bit strong-willed. How does that characterize our present mayor, and is he so different from others?
Yeah, this mayor has gained a lot of enemies. I've been told by one-time supporters he's unnecessarily made enemies. And clearly, being the mayor is a tough job, and the mayor has a right to put his people into power. But I talked to a bunch of people who tell me, in fact, I interviewed more than 30, who told me stories of being bullied by the mayor, threatened by the mayor, or he retaliated against them in ways that I don't think had fully been written about before.
And many of the people that you talked to, they didn't want to be named. They didn't want to have their identity
precisely
disclosed.
Because of the fear of retaliation by the mayor. And since the article was published at the Lens yesterday, I've gotten more people telling me of instances where they feel like the mayor did something against them, but again, they did not want to go on the record because of fear of retaliation.
But once again, he's the mayor. This is the mayor. This is a very powerful mayor, too, whoever occupies that seat. It's a very, very powerful position. And so in politics, is it just sort of something to expect that if a mayor feels that an individual or a group is not supporting what he or she would want to have done, that perhaps he won't act in the way that this group or this individual would want him to? Or is this sort of beyond the pale here?
I think everyone would agree that you don't want a nice person as mayor who doesn't get anything done. That you and you know, as I said earlier, being mayor of New Orleans is not an easy job. And Mitch Landrieu came into office at a tough time, and there was a feeling that Ray Nagin just wasn't up to the job. And so, Mayor Landrieu, in an interview with me on Wednesday, made those points. He said I had to take on entrenched interests, but I had to point out that a lot of one-time supporters are now against him because they felt like that he ran roughshod over them. He treated them poorly, rudely. Chance encounters with people who disagree with him, he treated them very badly. And it seems that this mayor is so convinced of his ideas that it's the right way. When he makes a decision, he expects people to fall in line, and if they don't, he really seems to have a problem with those who disagree with him.
Tyler, it sounded like in your story that he ended the interview early too. Is that correct? Or
yeah, it wasn't done in a rude way.
okay, I was just curious because it sounded, it came
walk
across
out on
early.
you?
I didn't know if he got fed
No,
up with the
but
line of questioning. Or
he did. I was kind of going down the list of the people that I had talked to, and I said, well, this person said this, and he got tired of that. And he may not have. I don't think he really enjoyed that much. But to be fair to him, it wasn't like he stormed out of the meeting or anything like that.
In modern times, how much power does a mayor have to be vindictive? I mean, back in the days when you had machine boss mayors and they had this whole operation out there and they controlled jobs, they could do a lot. I mean, they control a lot. I mean, even down to a policeman on the beat. But in the age of civil service, I mean, they don't control as many jobs. I mean, they have a certain amount of non-classified jobs.
Now, civil service is one of the things that he's trying to weaken a little bit. He thinks the mayor should have more control over his own people, I think.
Yeah, the mayor, I've known him since he was in the state legislature. He's a fun guy to talk to in the normal circumstances. He's affable. So this side that I began hearing about when I returned to New Orleans a little over a year ago surprised me. These stories of vindictiveness. Now, Stephanie, you knew when he was in the legislature too. Mm-hmm. I've had people tell me that it's really this side of him has come out as mayor.
But he, of course, would say that's just not the case. According to your piece, he said there's no way that there's any vindictiveness here. I'm just doing my job and getting the job done.
Exactly.
Did you get the sense at all that he was absorbing what you were saying, though, what people are feeling and saying, that maybe he's thinking about this?
He didn't at least admit it to me. His initial responses were not sort of like Governor Christie did the other day, immediately apologizing and apologizing. He certainly didn't apologize at all for his actions. And in fact, he tried to say that he's pissed off people or angered people because he's taken on entrenched political interests.
Yeah.
But I had to say, look, there's actually a lot of ordinary people who were with you who've gotten upset by the way you've treated them.
All right, well, we're going to have to move on to our next topic, but it's always interesting to talk politics, and we'll be talking more. We're going to go now to Carnival, which is always fun for us to talk about as well. Errol, there are some proposed changes?
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of, and LaToya Cantrell, who says, I was elected a year ago. I didn't realize it's been my first time, having to deal with Mardi Gras, but her district, which includes Uptown, there's a whole series of proposals having to do with the buildup along St. Charles, putting ladders back and trying to have fewer people barbecuing and people that are, building these shelters. But the point I want to make is that this law, and I think most of it's probably good law, but it is a result of something that the city has created over the last few years. Because what has changed about Carnival is that you have more and more clustering of parades along the St. Charles route. It used to be that parades were scattered throughout the city, and maybe you'd have one parade here one day and one parade the next day. And over the years, what they've done is except for Endymion, they've done away with that. Everything else is along the St. Charles route, and there's no single parade anymore. It's all double or triple headers. So once you do that, once you have a lot of parades going along the same route, then you're going to have people wanting to put portalettes. You're going to have people people saying, let's make a party out of this because we're going to be here a long time. You're going to have people saying we need stairs. And so this is just a response to the way that what the city has done. Now, the reason the city has done it is because it's better for crowd control for them. The police don't have to move barricades. And so I'm not saying the city was wrong in doing that, but it just kind of creates another problem. On the Sunday before Mardi Gras, you have 3 parades that day. Okeanos and Mid-City and Toth, and then you got Bacchus that night. Bacchus is as big as 2 parades right there, and Toth has become like a big parade. So it's almost the equivalent of 5 parades just along the St. Charles
Road. And there's
Road.
no break at all.
Right,
and so there needs to be more controls, and some of which will be you can't block intersections with portable toilets or barbecue pits or whatever. And then also if you throw something back from the crowd to a driver, you're going to get fined.
If somebody throws back at a defenseless person on the float, they should go straight to Angola. I mean that's to me that's a terrible crime. But I'm just saying is that this new law that we're seeing is probably a good law. It's just a response to what the city has done to create other problems.
Okay, Errol, thanks a lot.
Okay.
There was some action today, well, this week. Well, I should maybe say some non-action, actually, in Jefferson regarding the hospitals. They deferred again.
Again, I mean, this was a process that was really on the fast track to privatize the 2 parish hospitals, East Jefferson and West Jefferson. Slow track now. What happened is really that negotiations broke down. In general, people aligned with West Jefferson wanted to go with the Children's Hospital, the local nonprofit that's going to be running the big new state successor to Charity Hospital. On the East Bank, they tended to favor HCA, which is a for-profit company that runs Tulane Medical Center and some other hospitals from Tennessee. And they were really at a standstill. The hospital boards were supposed to decide. They couldn't agree, so then they punted it off to the parish council. They can't agree. So what happened this week is the parish council voted to seek, voted 4-3, it was a close vote, to seek an audit of all the proposals. There's also a proposal to split the 2 up and lease them out separately. And, one of the questions, I think, is what will this audit? What's even the purpose of this audit? Is it to only look at the financials? Is it to look at the treatment side? It's a really complicated question how one or both of these hospitals would fit into a larger system. And the question is, which system do they want to join? Children's also has Turo. It has a number of other hospitals. And then Ochsner is still kind of out there hoping to get in. And
still a possibility there. So there have been other studies. So there have been 2 other studies. There's the Kaufman Hall, and then there was another one, wasn't there?
The Kaufman Hall is the main one.
Okay.
And they were hired, but again, it wasn't really clear were they supposed to make a recommendation? Were they not? Members of the parish council disagreed on kind of what they wanted out of this company, and a lot of politicians have criticized the results. I don't know when it's going to end. I think it's at least going to go through the summer.
So this audit then, though, how are that different? I mean,
well, we don't know yet because they haven't set the parameters of it yet. They just decided to do it.
And so they'll be discussing that, and then they will have to find this audit firm.
They will, yes.
And the decision, it's a big deal, right?
It's a very big deal. It's probably one of the biggest decisions the parish has ever made.
So those who supported the deferral said we really do need this time.
Right.
Even though people are anxious to get the decision
Even though
made.
Some of them had been ready to vote a while back, they're taking another look at it.
So we'll continue to talk
about it. What's the backstory? We
don't have enough time for that, I think. Yes.
So we'll have that for another day, Stephanie. We'll have the backstory.
I mean, these hospitals have been talking about merging for years, and haven't managed to do it.
So that's where we stand now, with a lot more questions than answers. Pelicans, how are Pelicans doing?
Well, not very good. Not very good.
Yeah, that's right.
They got a new name. They've got a new refurbished arena, new mascot, new logo, and they're still losing.
All-star game.
Not much has changed on the court with this team. Seemingly every year they go through a huge injury spree. They're going through it again this year. 3 of their top probably 6 players are hurt, and they've lost 7 games in a row. And people are still showing up, surprisingly. And they're going to probably even pick up a little more now that the Saints season are over. People tend to start thinking about basketball in January. But I got to tell you, I'm not impressed right now with where the direction of the program. And I think Mickey Loomis, who oversees the basketball operations, and Tom Benson, the owner, is going to have to take a long, hard look at what's going on out there in that organization. There's a lot of pressure from the basketball operations side to win. All their eggs are kind of in that basket now. The Saints operations are all under the same umbrella with the Pelicans and Saints under the same ownership. And the Saints, frankly, are tapped out revenue-wise. I mean, there's only so much blood in that turnip. They've sold all their season tickets, all their suites. They've tapped out everything in the dome. The revenue opportunities for Tom Benson are with the Pelicans. And right now, I think it's critical that they show some kind of progress because they've sold a lot of tickets with the new ownership. People were excited. They made some trades, but it's not translating to success on the court. And I'm worried about them maybe losing that momentum and that opportunity to capture the local audience.
What's it going to take to get that success on the court?
Well, I don't know. They've got to somehow get these guys that they traded for, and Ryan Anderson, Drew Holiday, Tyreek Evans back on the court. That's a huge thing, but I'm not sure where the vision is in the plan. When you're out there and talking to the Saints and Sean Payton and Mickey Loomis, they have a clear vision of where they want to be, not only this year, but in the future. Everybody they bring in fits into the program. I haven't seen that same vision from Dell Demps, the general manager, and Monty Williams. It seems like they turn over the roster and the core of the roster every year. We're in this transition phase. We hear about we have to have patience. I'm talking about fans in general. Have to have patience as this team learns to play together. Well, at some point, that's got to end, and they've got to start putting something together on the court that people can believe in.
At what point are we now in the season?
We're still fairly early. We haven't got to the halfway point yet. I mean, the All-Star game's coming up. But they're way behind. They're looking at another lottery pick, which could help to them going forward. But again, at some point, they've got to start winning and getting the playoffs, I think, to get people excited and to believe in them and to make an investment because it's expensive.
Of course, New Orleans is hosting the All-Star game, and this is twice during the brief history of the franchise here. David Stern has been very supportive of New Orleans. I mean, he's really done his best to try to make it work here.
Yeah, and I think the decision to sell the local ownership here with Tom Benson was a great move. I think everybody locally bought in. I mean, before the season, the Pelicans were in the top 12 in the league in ticket sales. That's incredible considering they haven't won in years. Now they've got to start justifying that.
Okay, Jeff, thanks a lot. We're going to have to move now to looking ahead. Mr. Errol, I'm going to go to you first.
Well, coming up is something called the Magnolia Marketplace. It was dedicated today. It's going to be luckily roughly in the area of the whole former Magnolia project complex. That's the area around Claren, Washington, Toledano. They say it's 100% pre-leased, and they expect it to open sometime in 2015.
All right, great. Tyler.
I'm looking at the mayor's race, and I think the key question for me is, does Judge Bagneris have the money to go on TV? He's, got it late into the race, and he is not known to the public. So is he able to advertise enough so that people will know about him to present an alternative to Mayor Landrieu?
And he's got about 2 weeks to do that. Jeff?
Saturday, I'll be at the fairgrounds. It should be great weather, and it's the first of the early prep races that lead up to the Louisiana Derby. This is our first chance to see the top 3-year-old horses that could potentially make it not only to the Louisiana Derby, but maybe to the Kentucky Derby. So it should be pretty exciting.
Exciting. Stephanie?
In state politics, everybody's on the David Vitter watch. He said he would decide whether he's going to run for governor in 2015 in January. We're halfway through, and meantime, John Kennedy, the state treasurer, has raised a lot of money. It looks like he might be ready to get in, too.
So Vitter Watch, we are on then.
Yes.
Okay, and thank you guys very much for being here with us. Thank you for joining us in Informed Sources. We hope to see you again next week. Have a good evening.